welcome to the Earth Feels podcast.
I'm Rose.
And I'm Christine.
Welcome to Earth Feels, the podcast for people feeling overwhelmed by the endlessly gloomy climate news.
Where every week we have soul-based conversations about climate change and explore the idea that climate change may be happening for us as much as it is happening to us.
If you are ready to shift your focus and secure the future for our kids and our grandkids, then this is the podcast for you.
And yes, we do know how to spell.
So what are we talking about today, Rose?
Are there cracks? Are we finally seeing cracks in the fossil fuel system? Great to see you again. I've been gone for a couple of weeks. I had a lot of personal stuff to take care of. So, and thank you. I owe you 1 or 10 for your willingness to be able to pick up the slack while, family has to come first.
Well, so, nice to see you on the other end of the microphone again.
Yes. And I feel like I really was kind of out of it for those couple of weeks. I would check in once or twice a day, but not living in it like I have been, and
obsessively.
and back to that in the last couple of days. So it's really incredible what's been happening over the last couple of weeks. And
it's like you miss a day of news. You miss a lot lately.
Yes, that's true. But there's so much going on. And so, let's talk a little bit about, starting with the whole railway being shut down in Canada and what happened, how the Indigenous really led to Teck withdrawing from a huge proposal that was going to go on in Canada. And then there seems to just be almost a domino effect.
So I wouldn't actually assert that it was only the growing Indigenous opposition, which specifically right now is focused on the natural gas pipeline in BC, but it's caught on because it represents so many treaty violations of the nation, the country of Canada, towards its Indigenous people. So that's what's rising there. And I think what I got out of the Teck letter, and of course it's so interesting because the Alberta Premier and the Conservative leader of the opposition get out of it, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau isn't doing enough,
right?
And to support fossil fuels, and of course other people's. I read some article referring to it as kind of a Rorschach test, where everybody just looks at it and sees what they want to see, because it's interesting because you're saying the Indigenous opposition, and yes, they do cite, Teck does cite the climate, as it were, of discussion around Indigenous issues and climate change in Canada, and they're saying we don't want this to be a distraction. They also said very clearly we support a price on carbon, and we want if you want investors, you need to have a predictable political climate around climate change. And so that's an admonition, I think, to both the federal and provincial governments, but of course the people who don't like our federal government are saying, you see, Justin Trudeau should have done more to support the Teck mine.
It's kind of interesting. Obviously I'm an outsider looking in, but it's kind of like Trudeau he was really being pushed up against the wall, and Teck, by making the withdrawal, kind of let him off the hook.
I know, it's interesting, isn't it?
He didn't have to come out one way or the other. It is.
Come out of the closet.
For his political game. For his political gain. I mean, he just stayed silent, and it kind of, the situation kind of diffused itself, at least for momentarily.
Yes, for Teck. And certainly the rail blockades. I don't know where this is going to end, because we had a standoff at Oka in Quebec, the Indigenous people, the Mohawk. That was back in 1990s. It lasted all summer. And it was a standoff between Indigenous people who were blocking a golf course that the municipality wanted to put on their traditional territory and on their burial grounds. And the army was sent in, the Canadian army. There were tanks.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Yeah.
And there's this very famous picture. I'll find it. If it's Creative Commons licensed, at least we'll put it up or we'll link to it, of a soldier and a Mohawk warrior facing off.
Yeah.
So it has the potential to deteriorate, and people are mad at the Indigenous people. I've been having conversations with, interestingly, people who support action on climate change who are really angry at these protests and saying they're going to be counterproductive. People are just going to be mad. And they're also saying, and it's true, that the Indigenous people are not speaking with one voice on this.
Mm-hmm.
So there are some people, some elders, even some traditional hereditary chiefs of the Wet'suwet'en are saying, this is not our way. We don't support this. So that's interesting. But that's just one piece of news. So let's talk about some more.
Well, JP Morgan, Doomsday Bank, right?
Per Bill McKibben.
I'm seeing all over social media calling out the fact that JP Morgan has invested $196 billion in fossil fuel exploration and extraction since Paris, and calling out, Jamie Dimon as CEO, do you have a conscience? Because they know, and they have pretended not to know, much like the oil companies have kind of, kept everything under wraps, what they knew when they knew it. But JP Morgan economists warned of catastrophic outcomes of human-caused climate crisis, and that came out just within the last week. There was
it was actually in January. People have started talking about it in the last week or two, but the actual Chase report was January 14th.
Okay, so yeah, it was called Risky Business. I'll just read a quote from that. It said, "It is clear that the Earth is on an unsustainable trajectory. Something will have to change at some point if the human race is going to survive." And that kind of quote, coming not from Extinction Rebellion or from 350.org, but coming from JP Morgan.
Economists at JP Morgan.
Correct. Yeah. Just huge news. Taking that one step further, JP Morgan Chase starts taking baby steps towards curbing fossil fuel loans. And I know you and I had a little bit of conversation about that. They are, there's a lot of pressure on JP Morgan Chase right now with the whole Bill McKibben, Doomsday Bank, and Stop the Money Pipeline. So JP Morgan is taking some action, but as we were discussing yesterday, they're curbing fossil fuel loans for companies that are almost solely coal oriented and invested in the Arctic. But that's their baby step forward, and it is a step. So I think we have to kind of massage them and say, yes, thank you for doing that much. But that doesn't mean that they're not giving fossil fuel loans to companies where coal is only a portion of their.
Yes, they could do a lot. They could do a lot better, is what you're saying. They've done a little tiny, I don't know, is that even a baby step? Half a baby step forward.
Right.
And yes, let's recognize it. Interestingly, yesterday was Investor Day in New York City at Chase Bank.
So talk about that. I don't know about that.
Well, I believe it's it's an annual event where they get as many investors in the room as who want to come. And so I'm pretty sure that the pressure that's being applied, public pressure on Chase Bank, along with the fact that it was Investor Day and they had to look people in the eye, was the reason that was announced. So
interesting.
Keep it up. That's what I get out of that. That's what Bill McKibben says. And
yeah, there's a quote from Bill McKibben that said, "This shows that even the biggest bank on earth feels citizen pressure. So we will keep supplying that."
Exactly. Well, and interestingly, we were talking about, this is kind of good news. We're talking about cracks showing up. This whole episode can be called good news, because not only Chase Bank and the Tech Frontier mine pull out, there's a couple of other
really good news stories out there.
Because in Australia, it's a Norwegian company.
Equinor.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
has abandoned plans to drill for oil in the Great Australian Bight. So I don't know enough about Australia to know if I suspect that's close to the coral reef.
No, the coral reef is actually on the east coast of Australia. The Bight is down south. So it's like, it would be like where Texas is versus the east, where Boston and New York and West Virginia are.
Okay.
It's a separate area.
Okay, well, so good news. And also, earlier this month, more good news, ABP, which is the Netherlands' biggest pension fund with 456 billion euros in assets, has announced plans to cut its exposure to coal mines and companies that produce oil from the oil sands.
Just discuss that again.
Okay. Well, so the news is that the Netherlands' biggest pension fund has announced it's going to cut its exposure to coal mines and companies that produce oil from the tar sands or the oil sands, whatever you want to call them, which is in Alberta and a little bit in Saskatchewan.
Yay.
Right here in my own backyard in Canada. And also, Japan's government pension investment fund, which is the world's largest retirement scheme, it hasn't made quite as bold an announcement as ABP, but it has announced plans to increase its sustainable investments. So it's not talking about disinvestment at this point, but it's talking about increasing its sustainable investment. And our friend Bill, Mr. McKibben, just tweeted out today from Britain. Britain's Royal College of Psychiatry has voted to divest from fossil fuels, as well as Jesuits in Britain, which is apparently an organization, are also divesting from fossil fuels. It feels like this snowball is picking up speed. That's a good image when we're talking about climate change, isn't it? A snowball. We want to save our snowballs.
But it is.
We want to save our snowballs. So this one is picking up steam. And I have one more good news.
Okay.
There is a huge coal mine in Brazil. It's called Copelmi, Copelmi, which is supported by the government, of course, of Bolsonaro. But it has just had its environmental license pulled by a judge because of the threat to Indigenous people and because they haven't been consulted. So this, even in Brazil.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It really is to be living through this in incredible time. We don't know how it's going to end yet. We got so much more to go. As you were saying, yes, when we chatted yesterday, you drove through Oakland and were just overwhelmed at the infrastructure there supported by fossil fuels.
Well, yeah, flying. I was visiting my son in Oakland, or outside of Oakland, and coming into the airport there and taking the BART, and you go through just cranes and cars and containers, and it's shipping, and it's just yeah. That whole area of the country too has grown it has exploded, and you really see the economic injustice and then the climate injustice. It just all kind of melds together. It's a little, the energy there is pretty intense.
Yes.
So it's nice to see, that there is some pushback. And then there was also the U.S. reluctantly agrees to add climate change to the G20 communique. So that finance ministers from 20 of the largest economies, they agreed to add a scant message of climate crisis in its communique.
Interesting, though, I believe this was the first time it was even on the agenda at all for the G20.
Yep. So they were there to discuss the economic challenges and focusing on growth and impediments to growth and ways to tax global digital companies. I mean, they're looking at making money, but they really felt the need. It's to include it is just a big thing, is a big step forward. It means
And
that it's front and foremost on everyone's mind, even if they don't want to admit it.
Well, and interestingly enough, with the whole coronavirus issue that's going on, which started in China and is now spreading, China's emissions are way down.
Yes. Yeah.
So somebody who tweeted out that article on Twitter said, I'm sorry, I don't remember who it was, but said, so don't tell me this can't be done, that we can't decrease our emissions. If one viral outbreak in China can dramatically, measurably decrease their emissions, we can do this. We just need to decide to do this.
Right. Climate change is happening for us, not just to us.
Exactly. And I was going to read a quote.
While you're looking for that, I'll just say one of the other articles that was in Good News this week was global emissions for 2019 have flattened. So after raising for a number of years, 2019 and 2018 are the same. So there's hope that you've got something to say. I can see it in your face.
No, I'm just like, it's hard to celebrate that because it should have been like going down so many years, but you're right. We need to.
It's just how do we meaningfully reduce greenhouse gases, and maybe this is just a blip. At least it didn't go up in 2019. It stayed at the same level as 2018. That has a codicil that has happened once before in 2014 and 2015. It was even, and then it went up again. But we just have to see. I think we have to look at everything that's encouraging as encouraging and kind of focus on that. In my humble opinion.
Yes. So what I wanted to read just a little bit of was the response from the Alberta Federation of Labor president to the decision from Tech to withdraw the application, because of course it's about jobs and the Premier of Alberta is making it about jobs. And interestingly enough, the Alberta government is tabling legislation to punish what people who want to I can't remember the wording exactly, but basically who are against pipelines. So they're tabling, so it's not constitutional. It won't stand up in a court of law, but they want to make a point that it's those environmentalists who are killing our economy. But
there's actually a push here in the United States that certain states will not allow, they've made it illegal to protest.
Yeah, interesting, in a country that prides itself on life, liberty, and the rule of law, isn't that it? But what the Alberta Federation of Labor responded, saying what this means, meaning the Tech Frontier Mine withdrawal, what this means is that the future of our oil and gas sector here in Alberta depends on us taking climate change much more seriously and putting much more rigorous policies in place to reduce emissions.
Wow.
It goes on. The Kenney government, so that's the Premier of Alberta, government's climate denial and climate belligerence is going to chase more investment away from our province and kill more jobs than anything that's been done by environmentalists or First Nations protesters. Taking climate change seriously is no longer an environmental imperative. It is now an economic imperative for our province.
Well, and that's what we need to see, right? We need to shift the money away, because the minute the money starts shifting away, then things can actually change.
Exactly. And I have another quote, which I love. There's an activist hedge fund, which is called TCI. I don't know what it stands for. I believe it's a British hedge fund.
Oh, I just saw this morning. Okay.
Run by Christopher Hohn, Hohn. And TCI said in December that it would vote against the directors of investee companies who do not improve their pollution disclosure. And here's a quote: investing in a company that doesn't disclose its pollution is like investing in a company that doesn't disclose its balance sheet. And they're talking about climate pollution as well as other forms of pollution. So this feels like a sea change to me.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah.
All that good news, it's just like, woo!
Yeah, it's almost like your head is just about to explode in a good way as opposed to like in a bad way.
Can one's head explode in a good way?
I don't know. There's another book that I wanted to mention we talked about yesterday. Christina
Figueres.
Okay, Christina Figueres, The Future We Choose. And that just came out yesterday, and it's talking about exactly what we're saying. It's our choice. And she's actually calling for some civil disobedience for people to really get out and use their political and their economic power to make a difference.
And their bodies, I think. I haven't read the book, and you haven't. Did you get your hands on it yesterday?
I didn't. No, and it was just released yesterday, so maybe that's something we can talk about next week.
Yes, and let's put a link up to the two websites, because they have a podcast, and they have a website called globaloptimism.com. Is that the
correct?
Okay, so yeah, we'll put that up. It's very interesting. It's Christiana Figueres, who was the UN climate negotiator. She is the sister of the former president of Costa Rica.
Okay.
And she's the one, we've talked about her before, who ended up going and spending time with Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist monk in France, before the Paris 2015 climate negotiations. So I'm very interested in what she has to say.
Great. So do we have, that's a lot of good news. Our whole podcast has been good news. Woo! Woo! So do we have an action step?
I believe that our action step and our sanity tip, again, we're going to be one, which is going to globaloptimism.com. That's the action step. And even just saying that, global optimism, gives you a hint.
Doesn't that just lift you, right?
Yeah, exactly. And check out some of the resources there, because they're saying the next 10 years are crucial for humanity, and each of us can make a difference.
Yep, we're all involved. We all have a part to play.
Yeah. So
great.
That's fun. We should do a podcast of just good news more often, Rose. If only maybe by the end of 2020, it'll just be good news on Earth.
Wouldn't that be amazing? Wouldn't that be amazing?
I'm going to set that intention, put it out there, because there are so many people all over the world working on this.
There are
many people. In fact, I think we have a minute or two. I was going to read a quote from Signs of an Awakening World from Venture Inward magazine, which my friend Jackie gave me yesterday. Jackie is not only my friend, she is definitely a friend of Earth Feels and a regular listener. So a shout out to Jackie. Thanks for your support. And here's some more good news. So the quote is from Carolyn Mass, MYSS, talking about healing this planet's inner and outer climate. So how about, can I finish off today's podcast reading this quote?
Absolutely.
It may well be that our inner climate is energetically connected to the collective climate of this planet. Perhaps we need to consider the unimaginable, that there are no boundaries between our personal energy systems and all of nature. We are one great interconnected field of life, comprised of air, earth, water, fire, and metal. Consciousness is a factor of energy, not form. These mystical teachings that Jesus and Buddha and other masters spoke of to their students need to be examined once again, but within the context of how we understand the power of human consciousness today, and the realization that we have awakened to, that we do in fact co-create our reality. It's time we take the radical leap in thinking and in imagining and realize that if we co-create our personal health, we must also be participating in the creation of the health of the whole planetary ecological system. Bio-spiritual ecology is a new way of approaching our shared reality. We are all responsible for the quality of all life on this planet, yours, mine, and all of nature. It's time we start perceiving our capacity to co-create through micro and macro lenses, for the truth is, what is in one is indeed in the whole. We can heal this planet, one person at a time, and it starts with us. And that's an excerpt from Breathe Together, How Healing Yourself Heals the Planet by Carolyn Mass.
Lovely. So that's
There
a good
we
way to
are.
launch into the day.
Yeah.
That's this week's episode of Earth Feels. Special thanks to singer-songwriter Kristen Hoffman for generously allowing us to use Song for the Ocean. Thanks for listening.
Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss an episode. Catch you next time.
Bye-bye.
Children of the earth, I'm calling out. There's a mission for you and for me. You see, your mother, she has been suffering, and the truth is told beneath the sea. So raise your voices